You open your refrigerator. Inside, you see what most people see every day, a container with last night's dinner. Maybe it's rice and chicken, maybe roasted potatoes, maybe a piece of salmon you saved for lunch today. You put it in the microwave, press start, wait 2 minutes, and eat it. It's normal. It's convenient. It's something millions of people do every single day without thinking twice about it. But what if I told you that the way you reheat certain foods could quietly change their chemistry in ways that scientists have been studying for decades? Changes that create compounds capable of damaging cells, increasing inflammation, and, over long periods of repeated exposure, contributing to the development of some of the most aggressive diseases known to medicine. One of those diseases is pancreatic cancer, a cancer so difficult to detect early that most cases are diagnosed only after it has already spread. The pancreas sits deep in your abdomen, hidden behind your stomach, silently producing digestive enzymes and hormones that regulate blood sugar. When something begins to go wrong inside that organ, the warning signs are often subtle or completely absent. By the time symptoms appear, the disease is frequently advanced. That's why researchers are intensely interested in everyday habits that may influence pancreatic health over decades. Diet is one of those habits. Not just what you eat, but how food is prepared, stored, and reheated. If you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our health and wellness tips. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand something that most people never think about when they warm leftovers. Reheating food isn't simply warming it up again. At the molecular level, it means exposing proteins, fats, and carbohydrates to heat for a second time after they have already undergone chemical changes during the first cooking process. The first time food is cooked, proteins unfold, bacteria are destroyed, and nutrients become easier to digest. That process is beneficial. But when certain foods are cooled, stored, and then heated again, especially at high temperatures or uneven heat, additional reactions can occur. Some of these reactions involve fats interacting with oxygen in the air, a process known as lipid oxidation. Others involve sugars reacting with amino acids in what scientists call the Maillard reaction, producing new molecules responsible for flavor and browning. Still others involve compounds in processed meats reacting with preservatives under heat. None of these reactions are inherently catastrophic in small amounts, but the chemistry becomes more complex when food is repeatedly heated or exposed to very high temperatures. One reaction researchers often discuss is lipid peroxidation. Many foods contain fats, and some of those fats, particularly polyunsaturated fats, are chemically delicate. When heated, especially in the presence of oxygen, these fats can break down into reactive molecules called lipid peroxides. During initial cooking, small amounts may form. But if the same food is cooled, stored, and then reheated, those partially oxidized fats can degrade further into secondary compounds such as aldehydes and ketones. Some of these molecules are biologically reactive, meaning they can interact with proteins, membranes, and DNA inside cells. Over time, repeated exposure to oxidized lipids has been studied for its potential role in chronic inflammation and cellular stress. Another compound that often appears in discussions about heated food is acrylamide. Acrylamide forms primarily in starchy foods when they are cooked at high temperatures, particularly above about 120 cc, through reactions between sugars and the amino acid asparagine. Foods like fried potatoes, toasted bread, and roasted grains can contain measurable levels of this compound. Laboratory studies have shown that very high doses of acrylamide can damage DNA in animal models, which is why scientists monitor its presence in foods and continue to study its long-term effects in humans. Importantly, the amount formed depends heavily on temperature and cooking method. Reheating certain starchy foods under intense heat may increase these levels slightly, particularly if the food becomes browned or crispy again. Then there are compounds known as heterocyclic amines, often abbreviated HCAs. These molecules form when muscle proteins in meat are exposed to very high cooking temperatures, such as grilling, frying, or broiling. When amino acids and creatine in meat react under intense heat, they create complex ring-shaped molecules that have been studied extensively in cancer research. Again, the levels depend on cooking method and temperature. Charred meat contains far higher levels than gently cooked meat. Reheating meat at high heat may create additional small amounts if browning occurs again. All of this brings us to a simple but important idea. The chemistry of food doesn't stop after it leaves the stove the first time. When food is cooled, stored, and heated again, its molecules continue to change. In most cases, these changes are minor, but with certain foods, especially those rich in fats, proteins, or starches, repeated heating can increase the formation of compounds that scientists monitor closely in nutritional research. That's why today we're going to look at 5 common foods that people frequently reheat and explore what happens chemically when they are heated a second time. The goal isn't to create fear about leftovers. It's to understand how preparation methods can influence the compounds present in everyday meals. Let's start with number 5. Rice. Rice is one of the most widely consumed foods in the world. Billions of people eat it daily. When rice is cooked and then cooled, something interesting happens to its starch. The long chains of glucose molecules rearrange themselves in a process known as retrogradation. This process creates resistant starch, a type of carbohydrate that behaves more like dietary fiber. Resistant starch can feed beneficial gut bacteria and may help moderate blood sugar levels. But when cooled rice is reheated at high temperatures, especially unevenly in a microwave, the structure of those starch molecules can break down again. In some cases, particularly if the rice dries out or becomes browned, reactions between sugars and amino acids may produce small amounts of compounds such as acrylamide or reactive carbonyl molecules like methyl glyoxal. Another issue with stored rice involves bacteria known as Bacillus cereus. These bacteria can survive cooking in the form of spores. If cooked rice is left at room temperature for too long before refrigeration, the spores can germinate and produce toxins that reheating may not fully destroy. For that reason, food safety experts recommend cooling rice quickly, refrigerating it promptly, and reheating it thoroughly if it's eaten later. Now let's move to number 4, chicken. Chicken is one of the most common proteins stored as leftovers. When chicken is cooked the first time, heat causes its proteins to unfold and coagulate. This transformation gives cooked chicken its familiar, firm texture. But chicken also contains fats, including polyunsaturated fatty acids, that are more susceptible to oxidation than saturated fats. When cooked chicken is stored and later reheated, particularly in a microwave where heat distribution can be uneven, some of those fats may undergo additional oxidation. This can produce small amounts of aldehydes and other breakdown products that contribute to flavor changes, sometimes described as warmed-over flavor. Food scientists have studied this phenomenon for decades because it affects taste and aroma in stored meat. While the amounts produced in normal reheating are generally small, researchers use these compounds as indicators of how fats degrade over time in cooked foods. Reheating chicken gently with moisture, such as in a pan with broth or sauce, can help reduce drying and excessive oxidation. Number 3 is fish and seafood. Fish is widely praised for its nutritional benefits, particularly because many species contain omega-3 fatty acids such as EPA and DHA. These fats are associated with cardiovascular and neurological health, but the same chemical structure that makes omega-3 fats beneficial also makes them highly sensitive to oxidation. Their multiple double bonds are easily attacked by oxygen when exposed to heat. When fish is cooked, a small degree of oxidation is expected, but when cooked fish is refrigerated and then reheated, those delicate fats may break down further. This can produce compounds responsible for the strong aroma often associated with reheated seafood. From a culinary standpoint, this is why many chefs recommend using leftover fish in cold dishes like salads, spreads, or grain bowls, rather than reheating it aggressively. Keeping reheating temperatures moderate can help preserve both flavor and nutritional quality. Number 2 on the list is potatoes. Potatoes are rich in starch, and like rice, they undergo significant structural changes during cooking and cooling. When a baked or boiled potato cools, part of its starch converts into resistant starch through retrogradation, but reheating the potato breaks some of that structure again. If the potato is reheated at high temperatures, especially if it becomes crispy or browned, Maillard reactions can produce compounds such as acrylamide. This is the same reaction responsible for the golden color of toasted bread or fried potatoes. The compound forms primarily on the surface where temperatures are highest. Another factor with potatoes is storage. Potatoes that have turned green or begun sprouting may contain higher levels of natural compounds called glycoalkaloids. These substances are part of the plant's natural defense system. Proper storage in a cool, dark place helps keep their levels low. Finally, we reach number 1, processed meats. Processed meats include foods such as bacon, sausage, ham, hot dogs, and many deli meats. These products are preserved using methods like curing, smoking, or the addition of nitrates and nitrites. When these preservatives are exposed to high heat, they can participate in chemical reactions that form compounds known as nitrosamines. Nitrosamines have been studied extensively because certain forms can damage DNA in laboratory experiments. For this reason, food manufacturers carefully regulate the amount of nitrates and nitrites used in processed meats, and they often add antioxidants like vitamin C to reduce nitrosamine formation during cooking. However, very high temperatures, such as frying bacon until heavily browned, can still increase their formation. Reheating processed meats at intense heat may create additional small amounts, particularly if the meat becomes crispy again. Looking at these 5 foods, rice, chicken, fish, potatoes, and processed meats, a pattern emerges. The key factors influencing chemical changes during reheating are temperature, oxygen exposure, moisture, and cooking duration. High heat, dryness, and repeated browning reactions are what tend to generate the compounds most frequently studied in food chemistry. Gentle reheating with moisture tends to minimize those reactions. That leads to some practical guidance. If you plan to store leftovers, refrigerate them promptly after cooking rather than leaving them at room temperature for long periods. When reheating, avoid extremely high temperatures whenever possible. Using the stove with a little water, broth, or sauce can help distribute heat evenly and prevent scorching. Microwaves can still be used safely, but stirring food halfway through heating and covering it to retain moisture can reduce hot spots. In some cases, like with fish, cold preparations may preserve flavor better than reheating. Another useful habit is cooking portions that match what you expect to eat within a day or 2. While leftovers are perfectly normal in many households, repeatedly reheating the same food over several days can gradually change its flavor and texture as oxidation reactions accumulate. Rotating fresh meals into your routine keeps both taste and nutritional quality high. None of this means leftovers are inherently dangerous. Millions of people safely eat reheated food every day. The science simply shows that heat triggers chemical reactions in food, and repeating that process can produce additional compounds. Understanding those reactions helps us make better decisions about how we cook, store, and reheat meals. Your pancreas, quietly working behind your stomach, plays a central role in digestion and metabolism. It produces enzymes that break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and it releases hormones that control blood sugar. Protecting its health isn't about fearing food. It's about building habits that support long-term well-being. Cooking methods, balanced nutrition, and proper food storage are small, everyday choices that add up over decades. So tonight, when you open your refrigerator and see leftovers waiting, pause for a moment and think about how you'll heat them. Maybe you'll warm them gently on the stove. Maybe you'll turn them into a cold salad or grain bowl. Or maybe you'll cook something fresh. These are small decisions, but they reflect a deeper awareness of how the chemistry of food interacts with the biology of your body. And that awareness is one of the most powerful tools we have for protecting our health over a lifetime. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss our health and wellness tips. See you in the next video.